Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. I wish I could have shown him his grandchildren. Such words escaped my lips, along with a sigh. I got married when I was 25. That was exactly 5 years ago. At my wedding, my father and I made a promise. I'll let you know first when I get pregnant. But that promise remained unfulfilled. That's about the only regret I have about my father. Since his illness was discovered a year ago, I've done everything I could for him. I regularly returned to my parents' home and visited the hospital with my mother. I increased the frequency of phone calls and video chats. I did everything I could think of. Still, I can't help but wonder, could I have done more? I muttered. My mother, sitting next to me, reassured me. You did well, Chelsea. Really? Yes, your father would be satisfied. Just then, my sister Portia returned. I'm back, brought the lawyer. My sister entered the living room saying so. Behind her was a man in his mid-40s. I assumed he was the lawyer, and he handed me his business card. I'm Samuel, the attorney. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Excuse me then. My mother guided the lawyer Samuel to his seat. As soon as he sat down, my sister blurted out, I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance. It's not all for you, Portia. I know that. My sister, now in a bad mood, glared at me. I glared back. My sister and I don't get along. We used to be okay, but things turned sour when we found out about Dad's illness. One reason was my sister's arrogant attitude. No matter how many times I reached out, she never visited our father. Of course, I may have said it wrong. I might have been a bit harsh because I was worried about him, but her reaction was also a problem. You're not a child. You don't have to be so stubborn. When I said that, my sister retorted, I'm not being stubborn. I live in the city. It's not easy to come. It's the countryside. But you can get here in 2 hours by car. Those 2 hours are tough. It costs money. It's money that's important to you? Of course it is. I'm busy, so stop contacting me. And with that, she finally stopped talking. Even if she lives far away, she could visit once in a while. I always thought so. That's why our relationship deteriorated so quickly. In the end, my sister never visited our father, so our relationship remained strained. Sensing the tension, the lawyer intervened. Let's calm down, please. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologized, and the lawyer nodded before continuing. As I mentioned on the phone, I have your husband's will. When did this happen? My mother murmured. A few weeks before he passed away, he contacted me. So you went to the hospital? Yes. I had him write the will in front of me, with his primary physician present. It turns out they had arranged for the primary physician to contact the lawyer when my father passed away. So after my father passed away, he contacted the lawyer. In turn, the lawyer reached out to us. That's how it happened, and why I'm contacting you now, the lawyer said, pulling out a white envelope. He placed it in front of us. This is the will. That's definitely Dad's handwriting, I muttered, verifying the characters on the envelope. My sister Portia seemed a bit sulky. Never mind, just tell us what's in it. I'm busy, you know. Very well, the lawyer said with a wry smile, opening the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper. This is what was written there. It stated that besides the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. We knew about the house and land, but what's this about a storage shed? As I was pondering this, my sister angrily said to the lawyer, Wait a minute, you didn't mention the farm. The farm? Yes, the farm Dad used to work on as a hobby. My father used to run a company in the next town, but after turning 50, he began to feel his age. I'm thinking of closing the company. I want to take it easy. Is that okay? I heard this when I was in high school. My sister, who was in college at the time, opposed it, but my mother and I, concerned about my father's health, agreed. Don't worry about the money, Portia. We have enough savings. My father reassured her. Reluctantly, she agreed. After that, my father really did close his company and started farming near our home. It feels good to move my body while farming, he said, looking happy. Seeing him like that, I felt glad I had agreed. But my sister didn't seem to feel the same. She had said she would return home after graduating from college, but instead, she got a job near her university. Eventually, she married the CEO of an IT company she met through work. Anyway, that's why Father was farming until he got sick. My sister insists that the farm should also be part of the inheritance. The lawyer reviewed the documents after hearing this from my sister. He quickly found a note and said, "The farm is rented land." "Rented? I thought we owned a large piece of land," my sister said, disappointed. Indeed, the farm where my father grew vegetables was spacious, but it might be too much for us, who know nothing about farming. Maybe it's good that it's rented. That's what I thought. The conversation then shifted to dividing the inheritance. "As for the division of the inheritance, the house and land go to the wife," the lawyer said. My sister grinned. "So we can divide the rest however we want?" "Please divide the savings and storage shed fairly between you two." "Savings means cash, right? I'll take the cash. How much is it?" "The savings amount to about $100,000. There's no need to pay inheritance tax for this amount." "Then I'll take the $100,000 in cash," my sister declared triumphantly. But I couldn't agree with such a selfish arrangement. I strongly protested against my sister. "Wait a minute, I object." "Why? I'm the eldest daughter." "That's irrelevant." "You can have the storage shed, what even that is." "What even is that, anyway?" My sister turned back to the lawyer. Flipping through the documents, the lawyer answered, "It's the storage shed next to the farm. You'll inherit the building, the land, and its contents." "With land?" My sister's eyes lit up. Even though she's married to the CEO of an IT company, does she still want more money? As I was wondering this, the lawyer told my sister the following. "The land comes with it, but it's about 65 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom." "A small bedroom?" "Yes, here are the photos." The lawyer placed photos of the shed on the table. Pictures of both the interior and exterior were displayed. The exterior clearly looked like a rundown shack. The inside contained only basic tools like hose, scissors, and shovels. Nothing that seemed valuable. "I don't want it." My sister grimaced. I peeked at the photos too. It was all very ordinary. These are sentimental items, but they won't bring in money. As I was thinking this, my sister spoke. "Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that dirty shed." "Hold on, that's not fair." "You agreed to the vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now?" It was hard to argue when she put it that way. Still, if I didn't say something, she'd take all of Dad's inheritance. "So we're good then?" My sister pressed me. As I struggled to answer, my mother chimed in. "As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections." "There's no way I would." "Then Portia gets the cash and Chelsea gets the shed." "Okay, it's settled then." My sister grinned. Feeling uneasy, I immediately objected. "Well, I'm not satisfied." "Oh, give it up." "But you're so greedy, aren't you?" "That's not it." "You're such a hassle. You care more about Dad than money, right?" My sister's words left me speechless. Of course, family is more important than money. Money is important, but it's not something to compare with family. While I was thinking this, my sister quickly ended the conversation. In the end, my mother got the house and land. My sister got Dad's savings. All that was left for me was the dirty shed. After that, my sister signed a document promising not to complain about the inheritance division. She left, laughing loudly. I was full of complaints. I couldn't help but vent to my mother. "Mom, why didn't you help me?" "I did help you." "How? You just sided with Portia." "That's not true. I made sure you got the shed." "Huh? I'm not happy about getting that shed." "You might find something surprisingly good if you look closely," my mother said with a smile. I could only puff out my cheeks in response. The next day, I took the key from the lawyer and headed to the shed near the field. It was a 10-minute walk from home, a rural road where no one else passed by. I finally reached the field my father had rented. For the past year, he had been hospitalized, so the field was empty. I opened the shed with the key. Wow, it's dusty. The shed was quite dusty, probably because no one had cleaned it. Still, there might be something sentimental from Dad. Thinking this, I looked around the shed. Nothing special here. It was just a dirty shed after all. All I found were tools Dad had used for farming. They could be considered sentimental, but they weren't anything special. Maybe I should just take what's inside for now, I mumbled, looking around the shed. That's when I noticed something. Huh. It looks smaller than from the outside. Maybe it was the dim light, but the inside of the shed felt a bit cramped. Is it just my imagination? Thinking this way, I stepped outside the shed, but something still felt off. After pondering for a bit, I decided to walk around to the back of the shed. The backside was adjacent to a thicket of various trees. To my surprise, there was another door there. Wait, another entrance at the back? I gasped. When I looked from inside the shed, there was only a wall, meaning the only entrance was the door I had used. Yet from the back, there was a door. What's going on? I thought about it. A door on the back should be visible from inside too, but it wasn't. That meant there had to be a wall in between. In other words, there was a space accessible only from the back. The moment I realized this, I got excited. This must be Dad's surprise. Dad always loved surprises. He even surprised me on my birthdays. Memories flooded back, and I found myself tearing up. I quickly returned inside the shed and began searching for the back door key. If it was Dad, he would have hidden it somewhere in the shed. With that gut feeling, I rummaged through the shed. After a while, I found 2 keys hidden in the handle of a shovel. I went around to the back and tried one of the keys in the door. With a click, the door opened. What could be in here? The space inside was indeed cramped, only about 3 feet wide. A large safe stood alone in the space. Is this from Dad's company? I recognized the safe. It was the same one I saw in the corner of his office when I was a child. Nostalgic. I hugged the safe. This was a true memory of my father. I felt fulfilled. This alone made the inheritance worthwhile. But knowing Dad, this couldn't be the end. There's got to be more surprises. I muttered and inserted the second key into the safe. With a slightly rusty sound, the safe opened. What? No way. The moment I saw the contents, I was stunned. Inside was an unexpected inheritance. What should I do? Oh, I have to tell Mom. I locked the safe and rushed to my mother. After explaining the situation to her, I called my husband, and with his help, we moved the safe from my parents' house. Then it hit me. The contents of the safe were undoubtedly Dad's. However, if it's part of my inheritance, including the shed, I might have to pay inheritance tax. Better get this checked out thoroughly. The contents of the safe were clearly valuable. I decided to consult the lawyer. Inheritance tax? For that you should. According to the lawyer, it's better to consult a certified public accountant. So I got a referral to an accountant from a friend. I left all the complicated matters to that accountant. Half a year passed in this way. Just when I thought things had finally settled down, my sister showed up near my home. What brings you here all of a sudden? Well, I had some business at our parents' house. So you stopped by? Yeah, something like that. My sister's behavior was strange. It's funny, no matter how you look at it. Even if my home is close to our parents', it's still a 20-minute drive. We're not the kind of sisters who would casually visit, especially after the tension over Dad's inheritance. It's not a relationship that comes to play carelessly. I couldn't shake off my suspicion as I looked at her. Meanwhile, my sister, acting a bit nervous, asked, "Can I come in?" "Sure, but what's the matter?" "I have something to talk about," my sister said, forcing a smile. Reluctantly, I let my sister into the house. After I served some coffee, she started to fidget and then began to speak. "So, did you win the lottery or something?" "What? No, I didn't." "Then did your husband get a bonus?" I tilted my head, puzzled. I never buy lottery tickets because I'm not interested. My husband, who's a salaried worker, does get a holiday bonus, but it's not that time of year. What on earth is she talking about? Confused, I asked her directly. Hey, what are you talking about? Suddenly, my sister got angry. What? Are you making fun of me? No, what are you talking about? Money! Money! You have it, don't you? Money? Yes, I heard about it. My sister began to speak excitedly. It was a story from a few days ago. Living in the city, my sister had run into our aunt by chance. The woman started the conversation like this. I know how hard it's been for you since you lost your father. Are you doing okay? Yes, well, I visited him many times when he was sick. Thank you. But you must be relieved, right? Getting such a big thank you gift. Thank you gift? Yes, your sister sent me a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting him. A gift card? Needless to say, what caught my sister's attention was the gift card. Hearing that I had sent it, she was convinced I had come into some extra money. You got a windfall, didn't you? Just admit it. My sister interrogated me. Ah, that's what this is about. I sighed. My sister didn't like my attitude and yelled, What's with that attitude? Are you mocking me? No, it was a thank you gift. So where did you get the money for it? That's what I want to know. From the inheritance, remember? Inheritance? Yes, I got the inheritance. So I sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us. Upon hearing this, my sister frowned. All you got was that dirty shed. Yes, that's true. But you can't sell that for money. But there was a safe inside it. That's where the real inheritance was. A safe? Real inheritance? I carefully explained to her about the watches in the safe. They were all valuable, collected by my father as a hobby during his lifetime. However, I didn't know their exact value. On the other hand, the remaining savings were about $100,000. Considering he was a business owner who could retire early, that amount seemed small. That led me to think he might have invested a lot in those watches. If they're valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax, my mother had said after seeing the contents of the safe. What should I do, Mom? When I asked, my mother thought for a moment and advised. Things like this always come out. You should declare it properly. How? Well, let's ask that lawyer we spoke to recently. So I consulted the lawyer again. I was told that if you inherit valuables, the inheritance tax is determined by their value at that time. I was also told that a certified public accountant could handle it for me. So I left it to the accountant. As a result, it was found the watches alone were worth at least $500,000. With watches this valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax. How should I pay it? How about keeping the ones you're emotionally attached to and selling the rest? Certainly, it doesn't make sense to me, who doesn't know the value, to hold on to such expensive watches. I'd rather someone who understands their worth have them. With that thought, I sold some of the watches. I used the money from the sale to pay the inheritance tax and sent thank you gifts to the relatives who had helped us. Those thank you gifts were the gift cards my sister was talking about. By the way, what I kept were items like the pocket watch my father often wore. I showed my sister the pocket watch as I told her this story. This one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me. However, my sister frowned upon hearing my story. What? You don't have any left? No, there are still some in the safe. Where's the safe? It's at Mom's. The safe is too big for this house. It's the one Dad used at his company. My sister looked away, seeming deep in thought. I felt uneasy seeing her like this. But right after that, she stood up and said, I'm leaving, now that I know where the money came from, and left. Considering how money-minded my sister is, I thought she might demand some of the money from the watch sales. I was relieved she left without making a fuss. However, in my relief, I forgot the unease I had felt earlier. My sister isn't that understanding. I had forgotten that. I was reminded of this late that night, when I got a call from my mother. Chelsea, it's urgent. Come over right away. What happened, Mom? It's just really bad. My mother was frantic and unclear. My husband and I rushed to my mother's house. As we approached, we noticed something strange. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red. What's going on? The reason became clear as we got closer. Several police cars were parked outside my parents' house. I pushed through the crowd and called out to my mother. "What happened, Mom?" "Well, Chelsea, you see?" According to my mother, it was after 9 p.m. Feeling tired, she had gone to bed already. Soon after, she heard strange noises. Sounds like someone searching for something came from beyond the door. "Oh, it's a burglar!" That's what my mother thought instantly. However, she was the only one in the house. Feeling helpless, she decided to escape through the window. Looking back, she saw the light of a flashlight moving inside the house. "This is definitely a burglar." Convinced, she ran to the neighbor's house and said, "Help, there's a burglar!" Hearing this, the neighbor immediately came out. They too saw the swaying light my mother was pointing at and called the police, thinking it was a burglar. However, it wasn't a burglar at all. It was my sister, who had sneaked into the house. She had gone to rummage through the safe after hearing my story. Neither my mother nor the neighbor had any way of knowing this. Soon the police arrived, and naturally my sister was shocked. Realizing she was in trouble, she tried to make a quick escape. Of course, it's her own family home, so there's no need to run. Yet in her panic, my sister thought she had to escape. In her rush, she bumped into the open door of the safe. Just then, the already unstable safe toppled over, falling right onto her as she tried to flee. "So Portia got trapped under it?" "Yes, that's what happened." "Is she okay?" "She was taken to the hospital by ambulance, but she keeps saying her leg hurts." What on earth was she thinking? I was truly dumbfounded. Afterward, my mother and I apologized to the police officers who had come to help, feeling bad for calling so late. I also phoned my sister's husband. "Wait, you're saying Portia broke into her own family home and got injured?" "Yes, that's correct." "What is Portia doing? She doesn't even do housework." "I'm really sorry about my sister." "That's it. I'm filing for divorce." "Divorce?" "Actually," according to my sister's husband, she had racked up a considerable amount of debt. Apparently, she had been spending a lot on brand-name items. He had just found out, and they had a huge fight. In the end, my sister stormed out of the house saying, "I'll borrow from Mom and pay it back." Turns out, she had already used the $100,000 she inherited to pay off her debts. Still short, she came to me to scrounge for more money. Learning about the contents of the safe led to her actions, which in turn led to this whole mess. No wonder her husband was furious. In the end, my sister, who had fractured her leg, was hospitalized. Her husband came to the hospital and started talking about divorce. Naturally, my sister made a scene. "I'm not getting a divorce, absolutely not." But it was too late. Her husband had brought the divorce papers. Seeing them, she had no choice but to sign. Now she's lying in her hospital bed, stunned. There's a part-time job magazine next to her, so she's probably planning to start working part-time to pay off her debts. That would be a relief for me. As for me, I decided to move back to my parents' home after all the commotion. Of course, I'm worried about my mother, but there's another reason. I found out I'm pregnant. My husband and I talked it over and decided to move back home and have my mother help us with the children and childcare. I wish I could have told my father about the
I had no idea what was going on at the time and spent a lot of time doubting my husband. This was almost 10 years ago. I was in my 30s and had only recently married my husband. With my husband working so hard even before we married, I expected life with him to be difficult. But he never came home for so long that I felt alone. At first, I tried to let my husband relax at home during the rare times he will be at home. But my frustration grew. I became harsh with him every time I saw his face. My husband would try to soothe me, but if he saw that I was still unsatisfied, he started to ignore me. I wanted him to look at me, no matter how busy he was with his work, because we were married. This emotion got the best of me, and I couldn't look at my husband objectively any longer. Whenever I would pick a fight with my husband, he would always say, "I'm going to settle down soon, and then we'll go to that island you like." But this never came true. "Work is more important than me, isn't it?" I said. If so, don't force yourself to come home. I'm tired too, and seeing you so exhausted makes me sad." No matter how many horrible things I said to him, he never took it seriously, and I began to have a nagging feeling that our marriage was coming to an end. Soon after, my husband could tell I wasn't even mad at him and had no feelings for him. I didn't suspect it at first because he worked in a department with many business trips. But one day, I found a receipt and membership card for a hotel near our house in his suit pocket after he came home from a business trip. The receipt indicated that he had stayed at the hotel on a day when he was out of town on a business trip, and he had accumulated points for more than one night. As a successful businessman who could get the job done, my husband was quite popular with the ladies at work. I guessed that he had found another woman to be with. Why should I have a hard time when he is enjoying being with another woman? I went out at night in spite of my husband's infidelity and made plans on the weekends too. It was fun for a while, but eventually I grew tired. I was tired of forcing myself to smile and not being able to truly enjoy myself. Perhaps it was finally time for my husband and I to be free. We're both avoiding each other, not facing each other as husband and wife. It would be preferable if my husband was happier with someone other than me. I suppose it's time for me to move on to the next chapter of my life. But this is the husband I used to love until I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with him. It took a lot of guts for me to ask for a divorce. I also wondered if there was really no other option but to call it quits. But it seems that my husband has a new girlfriend. After days of deliberation, I made a decision and sent a text message to my husband's cell phone. "Will you come home early today? I need to talk to you." I texted him on his cell phone. "I need to talk to you too, and I'll try to leave as soon as possible." He replied right away. I found myself thinking that my husband must not want a divorce, even though I was certain I had made my decision. My husband is also seeking a divorce. Just thinking about it made my heart race so fast that I couldn't breathe and I struggled to stand. My husband's heart was not with me, it went to someone else. Let's not cry anymore. At the very least, I should end things with a smile. I made my decision and waited for my husband to return home. It was shortly after 9 p.m. when my husband returned home. He'd lost an unexpected amount of weight. His kind eyes and tone of voice remained the same, but there was a gap between us that seemed insurmountable. My husband, who had never been a man of many words, kept looking down and remained silent except for a few words while I spoke. I wanted to end the conversation with my husband in a respectful manner because I felt he was making a lot of fun of me. We were a married couple, albeit for a short time, and we were about to divorce. So why wouldn't he tell me how he felt? I became increasingly angry and began to argue with him. However, my husband remained silent and listened to what I had to say. I wanted him to say something, so I told him that I knew about his new girlfriend. He probably thought I was oblivious to the fact. If he knew I knew everything, he would become impatient and make one excuse after another. Hearing my words, my husband looked at me in surprise, then smiled briefly. After a brief pause, he asked, "What, you know?" I said. Strangely, I couldn't help but laugh at his joking tone, which made my husband laugh. And for the first time in a long time, we laughed together. Regardless of the topic of the conversation, I was overjoyed to be able to laugh with my husband like we used to. We were able to talk again after that, which was a strange sensation. Perhaps it was because he found out I knew about the affair. My husband's face appeared to be revitalized. "Let's stop attacking each other. I don't want to leave you because I don't like you," he said. My husband agreed to my proposal, and we decided to clean our room and share our belongings so that we could leave at any time. They were all precious memories, but they were all things I wanted to keep hidden for a while. My husband has always been the type of person who uses things he's had for years, but today he hadn't hesitated to throw them away. His grace overwhelmed me even more. Take anything you want, it's all my fault, so this is my atonement. He said when the room was clean and tidy and we only had each other's belongings. My husband's eyes seemed to well up with tears as he said this. Did he feel sad as he cleaned up the mess? That was very clear to me because I felt the same way. You still have time to think about it, don't you? Let's clean up one step at a time. I decided to take a break for the rest of the day after cleaning up the entire mess. I took a bath to clear my mind. I should be able to get compensation from my unfaithful husband, but it was clear that our relationship had already ended. Besides, I don't want to taint my memories of my husband any further. As I was getting ready for bed after the bath, my husband entered the bedroom. He climbed into bed and gently drew me into his arms. Hey, this is weird, and I feel bad for your girlfriend, I said. My husband said quietly, Just one more time, I want to be by your side. I stiffened slightly. He was trembling as he wrapped his arms around me. Are you crying? I asked him, but he didn't respond. I noticed that his body was lighter and more bony as I stroked his back. Are you sure you're well? You appear to have shed some pounds. When I said this to him, his body stopped shaking. I've been cutting weight, he said, pulling his body away from mine, taking a deep breath. Okay, is there anything else I should know? Are you sure you're okay? It had been a long time since I had touched my husband's body, and I was surprised to see how different it looked from before. My husband's physique was always stocky and muscular. Even when he was busy, he enjoyed working out, but he told me, She likes me like this. I was sad once more. He's doing it for her. Why doesn't he just forget about me if he enjoys being with her so much that he loses weight? I see. Then there's no need to cry because it's the last day, or is it tears of joy? To keep my sadness at bay, I said something sarcastic that I didn't need to say. You're still the same. I like that part of you too. I wish you a happy life from tomorrow. I'll be praying for you wherever you are. My husband said lightly. After saying that, my husband began to snore. He was a man who moved at his own pace until the end. I hope so as well. I fell asleep after murmuring to his sleeping face. I overslept the next day because I had stayed up late cleaning up the room the day before. My husband was no longer in bed when I awoke. When I entered the living room, I noticed an A4-size envelope on the table, and when I opened it, I discovered a bank book and a slew of documents inside. When I removed everything, I discovered that it was related to our marital property. There was also an unusually large sum of money in the bank book in my name. And I discovered the divorce papers in a small envelope. My husband's section had already been filled, so all that remained was for me to complete and submit mine. In a panic, I dialed my husband's cell phone, but it was disconnected because it appeared to have been canceled. I spent several days asking about my husband's whereabouts with his parents and friends, but none of them would tell me. I had no choice but to contact his company, where I discovered that my husband, that workaholic, had resigned a few months before. It would have made sense if he made a new girlfriend and left, but why go to such length? Why didn't anyone tell me anything? I've grown suspicious of people, and there appears to be no way to contact my husband. The mental fatigue that had been building up since before the divorce nearly crushed me. My husband had gone to the trouble of arranging compensation for me, and now that I was free, I decided to spend some time in a place I really enjoyed. We arrived at the remote island, which took nearly a day to reach from the mainland. The island was depopulated and about 3,000 people lived there. I had visited the island once with my husband and was captivated by its natural beauty and the slow flow of time. My husband promised that we would return to the island once his work was completed. I miss my husband, but maybe what I need now is the peace and quiet of that place. I quit my job and moved to this remote island a few months later after renting the house to someone else. It was a risky move on my part. But I knew I couldn't stay in my house any longer. I'm not sure how my husband paid off the mortgage, but I know he worked very hard. But there were too many memories to keep living alone in the house. However, I didn't want to waste my husband's efforts, so I didn't want to just let it go. There are many strange things, but I can't ask my husband about them anymore. I plan to spend time on his quiet island, relaxing and letting myself go. I began to adjust to island life and became acquainted with my neighbors. I had enough assets to live a normal life without working, but I realized that doing nothing was even more depressing. So I started working as a sort of helper, assisting the elderly neighbors with their problems. I was initially treated as an outsider, but as I became more used to the work, I was relieved to be accepted as one of the islanders. As I was settling in, I learned from a coworker that a new client had arrived from the main island for medical treatment. He had become ill and had chosen this island as his final residence because there was no treatment available. Moving to this island with no medical facilities would be difficult, unless you're very prepared to move to this island in that condition. I was thinking that being in charge would be difficult when the new client asked for a visit, and I was the only one free. I had heard about his medical condition, so I was nervous as I went to his house. We arrived at a small house on a hill with a view of the ocean. The house had been vacant for a long time and had been renovated to the point where it was livable, but it was really just enough to keep the wind and rain out. I questioned whether this was the best place for him to spend his final days. With concern, I rang the doorbell. "Come in," a small voice said, barely audible. I gave my usual greeting and entered. I found my client sitting in front of a window, the sun and wind streaming in. I couldn't see his face because it was backlit, so I squinted as I approached. "It's a pleasure to meet you today, sir." As I looked at the face that had turned to me, I was speechless. My ex-husband sat there. We were both taken aback. We just stood there staring. My husband initiated the conversation. "You found me out," he said. He was mischievously smiling, like before. "What exactly are you doing here?" I was so confused by my husband's presence, the fact that he wasn't supposed to be there, as well as the information I had heard at work, that I couldn't speak properly. My husband grabbed my hand and forced me to sit next to him. He sat next to me and held my hand until I relaxed. I couldn't think of anything to say to him, and as I sat there, I heard a voice at the door. I wiped my tears and opened the door, where an elderly man stood. He seemed surprised to see my tear-stained face, but he bowed, went inside, and sat down next to my husband. "How are you doing today?" he inquired. He spoke in a soft voice. My husband said that there was nothing unusual and began chatting with him. The elderly man was most likely the island's only doctor. I remembered my colleagues telling me that there were no inpatient facilities on the island and that the clinic nurse and doctor were the island's lifelines. So it appears that my husband came to the island to spend his final days here. Although it was his decision, I listened intently to their conversation. I was wondering if there was anything I could do to help. My husband's doctor left after about 10 minutes of casual conversation. I couldn't help myself and ran after him. I guess my flustered appearance startled him again, but when I told him of our relationship, he seemed to understand. I questioned the doctor about my husband's condition and future treatment, but he said, "I can't tell you without his consent." Maybe he felt sorry for me and said, "He won't be able to walk by himself very soon. It seemed a shame for him to spend his final days alone, so please be there for him." I was stunned. What became of my husband's girlfriend? I returned back to the house with heavy steps, where my husband was waiting. My husband appeared to have anticipated my questioning the doctor and greeted me with a smile. "You're back." I couldn't live without my husband, so I asked him to let me spend the night. My husband's house was only a few pieces of luggage and a couple of futons. It was the first time I'd slept with my husband since we discussed divorce. As I cuddled up under the covers with my husband, we told each other how we got here. I was eager to ask about his illness, but I decided that it wasn't time to talk about painful topics, so we reminisced. This was also due to my feelings about his relationship with her. I asked him if he hadn't brought her to the island before I asked to stay, but he just laughed and covered it up. The fact that he didn't say anything suggested that there was a sad event. I was careful not to hurt his feelings by asking any more questions. The next day, I informed my employer of what had occurred and decided to take some time off. I want to spend what time my husband had with him. I took my husband, who couldn't walk very far, around the island in a wheelchair. There were places I remembered from my previous visit, places and scenery I wanted to show him for the first time. It was satisfying just being together. I wish we'd been this close when we were married. Even after my divorce, I discovered that the feelings I had grew stronger. But there's nothing I could do about it now. My husband would be confused if I told him. Like friends, I would stay by his side. The good times were fleeting, but the disease was gradually taking its toll on my husband. His physical strength had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer go out or even take the long-awaited walks. Even daily tasks became difficult, and he began to doze off and fall asleep more frequently. The doctor came to see him every day, but the only relief was that he was no longer in pain, and I couldn't believe that this was natural and that he would leave me so soon. I nursed my husband, never leaving his side for a second, so he wouldn't be alone when he awoke, which could happen at any time. Sometimes he'd wake up and tell me the rest of the dream he just awoke from, and other times he'd tell me about long-ago memories as if they just happened. I loved every moment, and this love exacerbated my sadness. My husband gradually stopped waking up after that. When we stopped talking, I stayed by his side, reading his favorite books and telling him about the sights and sounds I'd missed so he could understand. I wanted to tell him about a beautiful sunset one day, so I held his hand and tried to speak to him. My husband's hand was cold to the touch. He was barely breathing, and his chest moved in an unnatural way. I panicked and called the doctor, who said he would be there right away. I waited for him, feeling as if my heart was being ripped out of my chest by the out-of-control situation. I hoped it was a misunderstanding. I wanted him to reassure me that everything would be fine. However, when the doctor arrived, he took a look and said, "His blood pressure has already dropped quite a bit. Let him go in peace. I believe he wants you to stay with him, so I'll sit this one out. Don't worry. I'll be right there if anything happens, so please stay by his side." The doctor then said goodbye to my husband and walked out. So the time has come. I knew it would come, but it was unbearable. I was delighted to have met you. There were some challenges, but the truth is that I adore you. I held my husband's hand and whispered in his ear. Then my husband gently squeezed my hand back. It was medically impossible, but I clearly felt it. Soon after, he took his last breath and died quietly. I couldn't stop crying, but I was glad to have been there for him at the end. I was so busy after he had died that I didn't have time to mourn until after the burial. When I finally got home after cleaning up my husband's belongings, I noticed that mail had accumulated like a mountain. I was struck by the nostalgic handwriting I discovered as I went through them one by one. My husband had written dozens of letters. I wondered how long it had been since I had spent every day with him, trying to keep as close to him as possible. His letters started on the day of our reunion. My husband had moved here in the hope of seeing me again, but he didn't expect to actually find me here. It was difficult for him not to notice how surprised and delighted he was, it read. I couldn't stop laughing at how funny my husband's letters were. And the fact that my husband felt that way was the best compliment he could have given me. The date on the letter indicated that he had been posting it every day, but his handwriting became more dirty and the length of the letter became shorter as the days passed, clearly demonstrating the progression of his illness. With sadness, I continued reading, but my eyes stopped at one point. He had written the truth about our divorce. My husband's illness started during our marriage. When he discovered it, there was nothing they could do to help him, and the treatment he received as his last hope was ineffective and only had side effects. My husband made plans to divorce me because he didn't want me to spend the rest of my life with this disease, and I fell right into his trap. He had no idea I'd suspect the existence of another woman, but he didn't deny it because he thought he could give a lot of money to me as compensation. Because I no longer required medical treatment, I wanted to liquidate all of my assets so that you could live freely, he wrote. What hurtful words I'd hurled at my husband, who had thought that far from me. I sincerely apologized. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Then there was a knock on the front door. I wiped my tears quickly and opened the door to find my doctor standing there. What brings you here, doctor? I inquired. When I asked, he handed me a sealed envelope. The envelope was identical to the one I had just read from my husband. He asked me to post it every day. He wrote a few days' worth of letters before he fell into a coma, and he entrusted them to me. I couldn't refuse, and this is the last letter. He asked me to give it to you when you return to your home. So that's what this was about. This was my husband's final letter. I thanked the doctor and read my husband's letter alone. When I opened it quietly and calmly, I found a thin but clear note that said, "Thank you, I love you." We had come so far, but our hearts remained connected. I love you too. When I said this, I thought that I saw my husband's portrait's mouth smile a little. I am still living on this island, decades after my husband died. I am now officially recognized as an island resident. I built a grave next to where my husband's house used to stand, the day I was sure I'd never leave the island. My husband used to look out the window every day, and I'm sure he still does. I intend to join him there one day, and I am at peace and very happy to be surrounded by